$15.9 million. So what this bill does is take the first $9 million that was the same amount that was generated last year, and it gives every county the same amount that they had last year. That's a benchmark so that no one will lose any money. It takes the additional $6.7 million and allocates it according to the new formula, which is based on the size of the tax digest in the county. I would urge you to support this bill, and Mr. President, if there are no questions, I'll yield the well.
There is a question. Chair recognizes the minority leader, the senator from the 41st.
Senator, you. So this is kind of a one-year situation, and the next year it'll go to what their participating share would be.
This is a phase out over 5 years. It will be 80% the second year, 60-40, and it will phase out at the end of 5 years.
No further questions, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Question on the adoption of the committee substitute. Is there objection? Without objection, committee substitute is adopted. Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the bill? Is there objection? Agree in a Port of Committee which fair will pass the bill. Chair is none. Port of Committee is agreed to. Shall the main question be now put? Are there any objections? The chair is none and the main question is ordered. Shall this bill now pass? Questions on the pass the bill. All those in favor of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed no. Secretary, unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 47 and the nays are 4, and this bill, having received requisite constitutional majority, is therefore adopted. Secretary will read Senate Bill 127.
Senate Bill 127 by Senator Jeffries of the 17th and others, a bill to be entitled an Act to amend Chapter 5 of Title 21 of the Official Code of Georgia, annotated, relating to ethics in government so as to provide for waivers of certain civil penalties and fees incurred by candidates for local elected office, to provide for exceptions, to provide for refunds of certain civil penalties and fees, to provide for legislative findings, to provide for related matters, to provide an effective date, to repeal conflicting laws, and for other purposes. Senate Committee on Ethics recommends this bill do pass by substitute. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Ethics offers the following substitute to Senate Bill 127, a bill to be entitled an Act to amend Chapter 5 of Title 21 of the Official Code of Georgia, annotated, relating to ethics in government so as to provide for waivers of certain civil penalties and fees incurred by candidates for local elected office, to provide for exceptions, to provide for refunds of certain civil penalties and fees, to provide for legislative findings, to provide for automatic repeal, to provide for related matters, to provide for an effective date, to repeal conflicting laws, and for other purposes. Mr. President, this completes the order.
Chair recognizes Senator from the 17th. Present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to start off by reading an audit done by the Georgia Department of Audits last year on the Georgia Government Transparency Campaign Finance Commission. The Commission has not developed a system of management control necessary to ensure that the efficiency and effectively fulfilling its duties and responsibilities outlined in the Ethics Government Act. As a result, some aspects of the Act have not been implemented, and there is evidence of inconsistent treatment of late filings and complaint investigations. So now we go to the reason for the bill, and this is for local government only. This does not affect us. The committee substitute provides, upon written request of a candidate, the Commission is authorized to waive late fees, fines, civil penalties for local officials for forms that were due between January 1st, 2010 and January 1st, 2014. The bill does not create a blanket waiver of all fines. Bad actors will still be fined. This legislation also contains another safeguard against waiving fines against bad actors. If the Commission grants a waiver and within 2 years discovers evidence of knowing and willfully noncompliance, the Commission may revoke the waiver and reimpose the fines. And Mr. President, I'd be glad to answer some questions if there are any. Okay.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 26th for a question.
Senator Yield.
Yes, sir.
Now, this just deals with locals.
Local,
Not
city and
state.
county.
What happens, tell me what happens when locals never file, they run, but never file a disclosure, and they lost.
They will still be fined.
And they lost.
They will still be fined.
How do you collect it? If they find, is there any enforcement?
Under the Act, there is enforcement for them to send them a fine.
With the gentleman for the year.
Yes, sir.
If you send them the fine and they don't pay it, what is the enforcement on the fine and them not paying?
I'm not sure I know the answer to that.
No further questions, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Question is on the adoption of the committee substitute. Is there objection? Without objection, committee substitute is adopted. Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the bill? Is there objection? Agree in the Porter Committee, which will pass the bill. Chairs none. Porter Committee is agreed to. Shall the main question be now put? Are there any objections to chairs none? The main question is ordered. Shall this bill now pass? The question is on the passage of the bill. All those in favor of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed, no. Secretary, unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 48 and the nays are 4. And this bill, having received requisite constitutional majority, is therefore adopted. I need another assistant lieutenant governor up here. Let me get the senator from the 56th, son Ryan, up here to help me. I'm having a little difficulty. Secretary will read Senate Bill 126.
Senate Bill 126 by Senator Huffstetler of the 52nd and others, a bill to be entitled, an act to amend Chapter 4 of Title 26 of the Official Code of Georgia, annotated relating to pharmacists and pharmacies, to amend Chapter 2A of Title 31 of the Official Code of Georgia, annotated relating to the Department of Public Health, to amend Title 34 of Title 43 of the Official Code of Georgia, annotated relating to physicians, physicians' assistants, and others, so as to provide for emergency public access stations to allow a lay rescuer to consult with a medical professional or administer or make available auto-injectable epinephrine under certain circumstances, to provide for immunity, to provide for related matters, to repeal conflicting law, and for other purposes. The Senate Committee on Health and Human Services recommends this bill do pass by substitute. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Health and Human Services offers the following substitute to Senate Bill 126, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 4 of Title 26 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to pharmacists and pharmacies so as to provide for expansion of certain medical professionals to prescribe auto-injectable epinephrine to an authorized entity and for other emergency purposes. And for other purposes. Mr. President, this completes the order.
The chair recognizes the senator from the 52nd.
All right. Pretty doggone good there.
Thank you, Mr. President. We passed a bill allowing auto-injectable EpiPens a couple of years ago for our school systems, as now 46 states have done. A couple of facts, I'll try to be brief here, but there are about 1 out of every 13 children that have some sort of an allergy that can cause an anaphylactic reaction. We don't always know when these are going to occur, and about a fourth to a half of the time that it occurs, there was no known allergen before. So in the past, before 2 years ago, it had to be prescribed specifically to that child or adult. And now we made them available in the schools that the school nurses can legally give to anybody. This simply expands it, as many other states have done, to sports arenas, summer camps, public places. It's a total voluntary program. And I would ask for your favorable consideration of this. If there's no questions, I'll yield the well.
The chair recognizes the senator from the 35th.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Will the senator yield?
Always to you, I'll yield.
Thank you. I have a question about an EpiPen in the state capitol. This is the place where we give free peanuts, and there are a lot of people who are allergic to peanuts and maybe not even know it, as well as some of the legislators like myself who are allergic to other things like seafood and need an EpiPen, and we don't necessarily have them on our body. They might be in our car or something. So does this include EpiPens in public facilities like this one?
Thank you for the question. This is a public facility. Restaurants are public facilities, so our restaurant across the way could have one as well. So they would be available. They're voluntary, but they can be available to be used by trained personnel. We've certainly got some of those here, I believe.
Will the gentleman further yield?
I'll yield.
So if I have an episode one day, then thinking I'm eating chicken salad in the ante room and it's tuna, and go into start having problems, do I have to say, excuse me, wait, let me run across the street to the restaurant and get an EpiPen, or is it going to be? I'm just kidding.
Yeah, we
I'm
hope,
for this bill.
We'll hope we'll have them available for you most of all.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
Senator from the ninth, your light is on. Is that, did you? All right. No further questions, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Questions on the adoption of the committee substitute. Is there objection? Without objection, committee substitute is adopted. Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the bill? Is there objection? Agree in the Port Committee which fail pass the bill. Chair hears none. Port Committee is agreed to. All of those senators in favor of this bill will vote aye. Those opposed, no.
The secretary will unlock the machine.
And when we get the vote, I'll say
I hope this passes. I'm allergic to peanuts myself.
Well, my ambassador is actually lobbying me on this bill up here. He says, I hope it passes because he's allergic to peanuts himself. So,
Very good.
make sure we get it. Think you're not going to have a problem. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 53 and the nays are 0. And this bill, having received requisite constitutional majority, is therefore adopted. Hit the gavel. All right, there you go. Let's give him a round of applause. Well done. Good job, man. Good job. All right. Secretary will read Senate Bill 91.
Senate Bill 91 by Senator Harper the 7th and others, a bill to be entitled, an act to amend Chapter 3 of Title 3 of the Official Code of Georgia, annotated, relating to the regulation of alcoholic beverages generally, so as to provide for local control of distance requirements for grocery stores as to the retail sales of wine and malt beverages for consumption off the premises, only such that grocery stores shall be allowed to open in locations near school buildings and school grounds, if so permitted by the local governing authority, to provide for related matters, to repeal conflicting laws, and for other purposes. Mr. President, Senator Henson of the 41st and others offer the First Amendment to amend Senate Bill 91 by inserting after authority on line 6 the following to change a definition, by deleting lines 25 and 26 and inserting in lieu thereof the following. Term grocery store means a retail establishment which has a total retail floor space of at least 10,000 square feet, of which at least 85% is reserved for the sale of food and other non-alcoholic items. Mr. President, this completes the order.
Chair recognizes the distinguished senator from the 7th. Present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen, the Senate Bill 91 is a bill that I bring before you purely for economic development purposes in my district. We have an opportunity to have an economic development project, expand business and investment in my area of the state and in my district. And to make this happen and to make this work, we've got to change and make some adjustments in state law, and that's what this bill does. It is purely a jobs bill, Mr. President. This is purely a local control bill as well. It gives local governments the authority to make decisions only when this is in regards to grocery stores. So, Mr. President, that's what the bill does, and I will happily yield the well if there are no questions.
There are no questions, Senator. Chair recognizes Senator from the 41st to speak to Amendment Number 1.
Mr. President, members of the Senate, I know it's getting late, but you might want to pay attention. This bill is possibly about economic progress in an area, but it's more than that. What this bill says is the state prohibition of 100 yards from a school will be left up to local government. And that prohibition that was a state mandated prohibition will be decided by city council members that may be worried about the economic base of the city and might be more likely to be permissive. Certainly that's the case, I think, that the senator is trying to address. It will allow a store that, as long as it sells any food, even if it's a 400 square foot store, 1,800 square foot store that has maybe back walls, 15% of its space, floor space up to the ceiling, of beer and wine, sell alcohol. It will allow the rest of the store to possibly be T-shirts or smoking paraphernalia or pitchers or vases, and a small area to sell groceries. Grocery store is not defined in the code. As long as they sell some food, it basically, this will fall under the standard. In committee, I asked the author of the bill, is this for a big box retail store? It was indicated to the committee that it was. A Publix, for instance, is 45,000 feet or more. Kroger's, again, are large big box stores. I do not think, first of all, the Senate should vote as we just did, which I voted against, that takes away some of the penalties possibly for selling to minors or maybe minors buying alcohol, that next to a school, you will now have a place that sells beer and wine, less than 100 yards, and not just for them, the minors that will be drinking, but remember, when you have places that sell alcohol, it often attracts people that may not be the people you want next to the school. It often attracts people that you may not want to be on the pathway as your 11-year-old leaves the educational institution this morning full of his learning to see buying their cigarettes and beer as they go out. My amendment is about as calm and easy as it can be. It says that it has to be at least 10,000 square feet. I think that allows at least that there's going to be investment made. It will be a better place than the strip shopping center right next to a school with an 1,800 square foot store that will sell some food items and 15% of its floor space up to the ceiling beer and wine. I'm going to vote for my amendment. I urge you to. Ultimately, I'm going to vote against the bill because I don't like necessarily opening this up, but I really believe that my amendment is a positive thing, and I urge your adoption of my Amendment 1. I'll yield for questions.
You do have a question. Chair recognizes Senator from the 54th for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Senator. Thank you, Mr. President. Will the leader yield?
I yield.
Just as a point of reference, I think I understood your comments to indicate that you were trying to reserve it or maybe exclude convenience stores.
I want to exclude small stores, and yes, I really want to exclude smaller stores. They would often be convenience stores. In the bill, right now, and so convenience stores shouldn't enter into it because in most convenience stores, they sell products outside of the store. This bill prohibits outside sales such as gasoline. So we're not really into the convenience store here. They're already prohibited pretty much.
What about the Senate chamber? I mean, how many square feet would you say is in this? Would this be a large enough footprint to be qualify, or does it need to be
I
bigger?
believe this would be under 10,000 square foot in total, but you're getting, I mean, my house is 1,870 square feet. I know how big that is. Yeah. Yours is probably about 6,000 or so. Just double that, and you're there, Senator.
If that, Senator, if that.
If that. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Mr. President.
But it's not a convenience store issue because the bill says that if you sell stuff outside, meaning gas, that's already prohibited. It's really, I'm more worried about the small former gas station, small raggy-tack store next to a school that sells some food, that may have shelves of food, but has 85% of its things selling beer and wine, and then, of course, selling tobacco, and being right next to a school, and the people that it attracts. And you know, this is why this was prohibited in the first place. And I think that we need to be cautious as we respond to developers in certain areas that we're not overlooking why laws got there in the first place.
Chair recognizes Senator from the 40th for a question.
Senator Yield?
I yield.
So I understand, is that true that current law prohibits this under any circumstance? That's
within 100 yards.
Within 100 yards.
State law
okay.
Overrides local and prohibits within 100 yards.
Would you yield?
I yield.
So I understand, if I understand you want to allow it for, we'll call it the big box retailer for lack of a better, how about, I don't know, what's the size of like a CVS and those kind of drugstores? Are they?
I believe most of them would be over 10,000 square feet. Again, your statement that the senator from the 41st, which wishes to do it for 10,000 square feet or up, is not necessarily correct. I am giving you, members of this body, an opportunity if they want big box retailers or mid-sized places to do this, you know, the opportunity by offering this amendment without voting against the bill. As I said, I personally feel there was a reason for this law to begin with, and I was not presented enough really in committee. I think as we move forward, although I did move it forward and vote for it in committee, you know, I've talked to families, I've talked to people in my district, and thought more about it than this being some minor buying alcohol at a store, but thought of it more in the sense that who those stores attract and whether or not I really want my kids walking next door to them.
One final question?
Yeah, I yield.
So you're more concerned really about what these stores will look like versus what they're selling at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And that you would have certain elements because of the description of the store itself versus what they're selling.
I think that certain stores attract different types of people, and I have concerns.
You answered. Thank you very much.
No further questions, Senator.
Thank you.
Chair, Chair recognizes Senator from the 31st. What purpose you rise?
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent to be excused from voting on Senate Bill 91 pursuant to Senate Rule 5-1.8D.
Chair has that right. Are you're responsible for this economic development down there in rural Georgia?
All for economic development in rural Georgia.
Amen. Chair recognizes Senator from the 7th. Seventh to close. 7th. Going once, going twice. All right, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the Senate, I understand the minority leader's concern, and I appreciate his concern, but in the legislation and what is current law, it defines what a grocery store is, and it says that local authorities and local governments have the ability to make to put in more stringent requirements and more regulation on the local level as they see fit. And if they see fit to put in a square footage requirement for a store, that is their prerogative. I think we need to leave that to the local governments and local authorities and leave local government and let them have the ability and the local control to make those decisions. So with that, Mr. President, I oppose the amendment from that standpoint. And also from the standpoint of there are a lot of smaller box grocery stores going in. I know Walmart is working on a small box grocery store, some of which are less than 10,000 square feet. So I appreciate the opportunity, Mr. President, to close out debate. I will yield the well and oppose the amendment. Thank you, sir.
Senator has yielded. Chair recognizes Senator from the 41st. What purpose you rise?
Would it not brighten the President's day if the Senator from the 7th would yield for some questions to allow enlightenment of the body?
He's yielded the well, and he does have that right to do so. Chair recognizes Senator from the 25th. What purpose you rise?
President, I ask the unanimous consent to be excused from voting on Senate Bill 91 pursuant to Senate Rule 5-1-8.
Without objection, the Senator from the 25th will be excused. Senator from the 31st will be excused as well. The question is on adoption of Amendment Number 1, authored by the Senator from the 41st. Is there objection? There is objection. All of those in favor of Amendment Number 1 will rise, stand, and be counted. If you're in favor of Amendment 1, rise, stand, and be counted. Reverse. Reverse. On the amendment, the yeas are 21, the nays are 23, and the amendment has lost. Questions on now. Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the bill? Is there objection? Agree in the Porter Committee which fair will pass the bill? Chairs none. Porter Committee is agreed to. Shall the main question be now put? Are there any objections? Chairs none. And the main question is ordered. Shall this bill now pass? Questions on the pass of the bill. All those in favor of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed, no. Secretary will unlock the machine. No, he's not going to be able to reconsider that. That's a pretty heavy lift right now. On the pass the bill, the yeas are 22 and the nays are 27. And this bill I've received not enough for passage has failed. The Secretary will read Senate Bill 169.
Senate Bill 169 by Senator Gooch of the 51st and others, the bill to be entitled, an act to amend Title 32 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to highways, bridges, and ferries so as to revise what constitutes part of the state highway system, to provide for the appropriation of funds to the Department of Transportation, to provide for notice of the disposition of property, to amend Title 40 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to motor vehicles and traffic so as to provide for submission of electronic accident reports by law enforcement agencies, to provide for related matters, to repeal conflicting laws, and for other purposes. The Senate Committee on Transportation recommends that this bill do pass by substitute. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Transportation offers the following substitute to Senate Bill 169, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Title 32 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to highways, bridges, and ferries so as to revise what constitutes part of the state highway system, to provide for the appropriation of funds to the Department of Transportation, to provide for notice in the disposition of property, to provide for the determination of market value of property acquired by the department, and for other purposes. Mr. President, Senator Gooch of the 51st and others offer the First Amendment to amend the Senate Transportation Committee substitute to Senate Bill 169 by replacing shall with may on line 232. Mr. President, Senator Gooch of the 51st and others offer the Second Amendment to amend the Senate Transportation Committee substitute to Senate Bill 169 by deleting line 169 and inserting in lieu thereof the following: agency, county, or municipality, provided that the height of such reallocated sign shall not exceed the greater of the height of the existing sign or 75 feet as measured from the base of the sign or the crown of the adjacent roadway to which the sign is permitted, whichever is greater. Mr. President, Senator Gooch of the 51st and others offer the Third Amendment to the Senate Transportation Committee substitute to Senate Bill 169 by deleting lines 210 through 213 and inserting in lieu thereof the following: shall be paid by the local governing authority to the owner of the outdoor advertising sign, however, no compensation resulting from the denial of A. Mr. President, this completes the order.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 51st. Present the bill. We're on a roll here. Good luck, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, let me just say this is not an alcohol bill. I repeat, this is not an alcohol bill. This is your annual housekeeping bill. It's a simple housekeeping bill, as we always say from the well, for the DOT. And I'll say this today. I don't know that I've heard a lot of these words being used. Passage of this bill will save taxpayers tens of millions of dollars. Let me say that again so you hear me. Passage of this bill will result in the savings to the taxpayers of this state tens of millions of dollars. So if you want to be a great American, vote for this bill. Let me just go through it briefly. We can talk about the amendments and then we'll see if there's any questions so we don't spend too much time up here. I know you all want to go home. Section 1 of the bill is more conforming language, streamlines the current process and helps to avoid future confusion rather than requiring DOT to temporarily designate a local road a state road in order to use federal funds. We're striking the language on that Section 1 to allow them to take those federal funds and help the locals and partner with the locals to save tax dollars there as well. Section 2 also allows the DOT to use federal funds on local roads in partnerships with the state road and tollway authority. It eliminates the restriction on using state and federal funds to purchase right-of-way on local road projects. It's very important here in the metro area and around the other metro areas in the state. Section 3 reforms the right-of-way disposal process, which helps DOT to more easily surplus property off the state books, puts the property back on the tax digest around the state. We have about 1,200 acres of land currently that is up for surplus, over 122 parcels at this time that have been identified. This process will enable them to move that property quicker, get it back out into the hands of the taxpayers, and hopefully create some economic development. It also allows them in that section to utilize real estate brokers just like state and local governments are allowed to do. It allows them to negotiate the sales once the appraisals have been taken in, and they can put them up for auction as well. Section 4 deals with updating the transit safety oversight section, which has not been modified since the 1991 Federal Transportation Bill. This is basically conforming with federal law in the name change. G and H in that section mirror similar language in Title 32 and ensure that the state's ability to comply with federal safety oversight requirements. Section 5 deals with helping to ensure that if a property is acquired by the state for right-of-way on which is a lawful billboard is located, the billboard should be and should have the ability to relocate on an adjacent property if possible. If a local government by ordinance prevents the relocation or denies a variance for relocation, then the local government would be responsible for compensating the billboard owner. Section 6 deals with the sheriffs. If you've gotten a call or an email from your sheriff this week, the amendments that we're proposing today should satisfy the concerns of the sheriffs around the state. We are changing the word shall to may. The DOT is attempting to get all the sheriffs, all the police departments, all of the campus security personnel around the state to begin putting all of their traffic accident reports online through a software program that is available to them free of charge. That helps enable the process of getting that information about the accidents onto the Georgia DOT's servers and not have to use labor to manually enter that data. Some of the sheriffs around the state do not want to be mandated to do that. They want to continue processing their accident reports like they're currently doing, and they do still mail those in every month. But however, the DOT has to enter that data manually, and we're trying to automate this process to, of course, save money to the taxpayers. So for now, we're going to leave the word may in there and strike the word shall in our amendment. So, Mr. President, I'll be glad to go over the amendments at the proper time. If you want to take questions, I'll be glad to take questions.
There is a question. Chair recognizes Senator from the 54th for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the Senator yield?
Yes, sir, I will.
Senator, I'm looking at your proposed amendment number 2, and if I'm reading it correctly, though I understood your comments to say the same sign could be moved back, if I read it literally, it means that a higher sign could be replaced. Is it true that Amendment 2 would allow for an increase in height over the previous sign?
Yes, sir, and we put this amendment at the request of the locals. They did not want a 150-foot billboard necessarily to be put back at 150 feet. But what the provision in the bill does allow is for the billboard to be moved to a site that is visible and adjust the angle and the height to where you could see it from the roadway, not to exceed 75 feet or the existing height of the billboard. So it conforms, Senator from 54th, back to the code section we changed a couple of years ago, if you recall, when we allowed the trees to be mowed down to lower the height of the sign. So that's the language. It conforms with that, but also this was at the request of GMA.
So I understand that. I'm asking about a billboard that's less than 75 feet would be able to go up to 75.
That's correct.
I understand what you're saying about if it's 150, it stays 150. Mm-hmm. But you're saying that it would go up to 75 if it was a ground level billboard or one of these short ones. If they moved it, it could go. It would have the right to go up to 75.
That's correct.
Okay.
To avoid obviously obstructions, trees or a building or what have you. This allows them to move them back, whether it's 20 feet, 30 feet, whatever the distance is. It allows them to be able to keep the visibility and not have to pay for a taking of the property.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator.
Senator, there are no further questions. Have you spoken to all of your amendments?
We just spoke.
1, 2, and 3.
We spoke on number 2.
There are
number 1 I mentioned.
Questions.
Number 1 I did mention is replacing the word shall with may, and the second, or number 3 rather, is consistent with current state law regarding compensation and the taking. This, too, was a request by GMA. They wanted to make sure that the language in the taking and the compensation of the private property was consistent with current state law, and that's what this bill, this amendment does. It clarifies that
Very
for
good.
everyone's purpose.
Chair recognizes senator from the 9th for a question.
Do you yield?
I do.
Amendment number 2, does that give municipalities and counties the flexibility to go above the current height, or does it actually circumvent their current regulations if their regulations only allow for a lower height?
It's a negotiation to allow the local governments to work with the billboard folks and the DOT to allow us to move the signs to put them in a spot to where they're still visible from the roadway. If you can't put it in that spot under the 75-foot mark, and if you can't get it in there, then the DOT or the local governments would have to pay for the taking of that property.
Thank you.
I'd like to welcome on the floor of the Senate the Rules Chairman in the House is present with us today. Sitting there, you know, conversing with the Senate Rules Chairman, trying to determine what other bills are going to get done this year, I'm certain of. So welcome. Absolutely. Welcome, Senator. And Chair recognizes item 28.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would the senator yield?
Yes, sir.
And just to clarify, Senator, do you intend to leave on line 228 the shall in that area too, or do you think that needs to be changed to may also? Line 228 with regards to Amendment 1.
No, sir, we let me read it. I would say you wouldn't have to strike that because they are required to submit them. The shall on 232, Senator, requires them to submit it by using the non-proprietary interchangeable electronic format method that the DOT has provided. So they could use other means of doing that. So I don't see that the mandate there of the shall should be struck, but I'm just looking at it on the fly. So.
I'm just trying to make sure that we didn't omit something you intended to do.
We can change it in the House in that committee process. I'll carry it over there.
Thanks, Senator.
No further questions, Senator.
Thank you.
The question now is on Amendment number 1. Is there a... Let the Senator get out of the way. Are you finished, Senator?
I'm finished.
Question now is on Amendment number 1. Is there objection? Without objection, Amendment number 1 is adopted. The question now is on Amendment number 2. Is there objection? There is objection to Amendment number 2. All of those in favor of Amendment number 2, rise, stand, and be counted. If you are in favor of Amendment number 2, rise, stand, and be counted. In favor of Amendment number 2. Reverse, reverse. On Amendment number 2, the yeas are 28 and the nays are 4, and Amendment number 2 has passed. Question now is on Amendment number 3. Is there objection? Without objection, Amendment number 3 is adopted. Now the question is on the adoption of the committee substitute. Is there objection? As amended, without objection, the committee substitute as amended is adopted. Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the bill? Is there objection? Agree in the Porter Committee which fair will pass the bill. Chairs none. Porter Committee is agreed to. Shall the main question be now put? Are there any objections? The chairs none. Main question is ordered. Shall this bill now pass? Questions on the passage of the bill. All those in favor of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed no. Secretary will unlock the machine. Chair recognizes Senator from the 54th. For what purpose you rise?
Parliamentary inquiry, Mr. President.
State your inquiry.
Isn't it true that with Amendment 2 added, the now minimum height for any relocated sign is 75 feet, no matter what its height was before? The minimum height is now 75 feet for any relocated sign.
Keep talking. The vote total is going higher and higher. No, no, the senator knows from which he speaks. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 48, the nays are 6, and this bill, MC Rex constitutional majority, is therefore adopted. Secretary will read Senate Bill 143.
Senate Bill 143 by Senator Huffstetler of the 52nd and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 24 of Title 33 of the Official Code of Georgia, annotated relating to insurance generally, so as to require an insurer providing its services under the state health benefit plan to include certain trauma centers in its provider network, to provide for a mechanism to resolve disputes between insurers and certain hospitals, to provide for legislative intent, to provide for definitions, to provide for an appeal to the Commissioner of Insurance, to provide for an appointment of an arbitration panel, to provide for the panel membership and duties, to provide for subject matter of disputes, to provide for binding decisions, to provide for appeal of the arbitration panel's decision and venue, to provide for related matters, to repeal conflicting law, and for other purposes. Senate Committee on Insurance and Labor recommends this bill do pass by substitute. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Insurance and Labor offers the following substitute to Senate Bill 143, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 24 of Title 33 of the Official Code of Georgia, annotated relating to insurance generally, so as to require an insurer providing services under the state health benefit plan to include certain trauma centers in its provider network, to provide for a mechanism to resolve disputes between insurers and certain hospitals, to provide for legislative intent, to provide for definitions, to provide for an appeal to the Commissioner of Insurance, to provide for an appointment of an arbitration panel, to provide for the panel membership and duties, to provide for subject matter of disputes, to provide for binding decisions, to provide for appeal in the arbitration panel process, and for other purposes. Mr. President, this completes the order.
Chair recognizes the distinguished senator from the 52nd to present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you for the opportunity to present to you Senate Bill 143. The need for this bill came to my attention due to this dispute that is ongoing between Grady Health System and Blue Cross. As you know, Grady, our Level 1 trauma hospital, blocks away from the state capitol, is out of network with Blue Cross, which is Georgia's largest health insurer and the largest insurer in the state health benefit plan. In fact, 94% of the 630,000 members of the state health benefit plan have their insurance administered through Blue Cross. This means nearly all state health benefit plan members are impacted by this dispute, including many in this building and under the Gold Dome. This means that a family under the Bronze plan can have an out-of-pocket cost of $24,000. While I understand that Grady and Blue Cross are continuing to negotiate and try to work out their differences, this bill aims to create a long-term solution to prevent a situation like this from ever happening again. This requirement is no different than what the state already does with Medicaid managed care organizations, where the state mandates that the CMOs meet certain network adequacy and geographic access standards in order to have a state contract. And let's remember, we are self-insured under our state plan. Blue Cross is the third-party administrator, and I'm not trying to get in the middle of the dispute, but trying to resolve it fairly. So Section 2 of this bill, it goes on to provide a dispute resolution so that insurers and Level 1 trauma centers can fairly and objectively resolve their differences through binding arbitration if needed. The bill allows either party, the insurer or the hospital, to appeal to the state insurance commissioner, who will facilitate the appointment of an arbitration panel composed of 3 members. Each party will appoint an arbitrator, and those two will choose the third member of the panel. The panel has 60 days to hear the evidence and issue a decision. or the parties can come to an agreement on their own, and that will become the decision of the arbitration panel. Overall, the bill is going to guarantee that state employees will always have access to the unique life-saving services offered at Georgia's Level 1 trauma centers, and it protects the state employees from being caught in the middle of disputes between the state's third-party administrator and hospitals. Again, this plan is really a contract that we have between the state and our employees. Georgia is self-insured. The insurance companies providing services are the state's third-party administrators. I know I've heard both sides of this, and I don't know all the facts. I do know that this would be a fair method for the two sides to come together on this. In both the subcommittee and the committee, there was no opposition presented to this plan. Mr. President, members of the Senate, I ask for your favorable consideration. Let's ensure that our state health benefit plan beneficiaries don't have to go through this again. And if there are no questions, I'll yield the well.
There are questions. Chair recognizes Senator from the 53rd for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Yield.
I'll yield.
Senator, I appreciate your interest in this issue, and I know your background in medicine too, so I know it's important to you. But can you, isn't it true that DCH already has the ability to do this today that you're trying to legislate?
The DCH did come to our final committee meeting and said that they thought there was a way they could do this. They would not commit to the chairman of insurance that they absolutely could do that, but that they could. They did not oppose this bill. They said they were neutral on the bill.
Chair recognizes Senator from the 34th on the question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the Senator yield?
I'll certainly yield.
Senator, thank you. Thank you so much for realizing the importance of making sure not only we as state employees, but our teachers and others who had a grave concern with that impasse. Is it not true that I do plan to support your bill?
I would certainly agree that you would support, and I believe we're the second sponsor of this bill.
Thank you.
No further questions, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Questions on the adoption of the committee substitute. Is there objection? Without objection, the committee substitute is adopted. Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the bill? Is there object? Chair recognizes Senator from the 45th. What purpose you rise?
Mr. President, could I have a parliamentary inquiry?
State your inquiry.
Is it not true that I would like to ask unanimous consent to be excused from voting on Senate Bill 143 pursuant to Senate Rule 5-1-8D as in dog?
Without objection, the senator will be excused on this vote. Now, does any other senator wish to speak for or against the bill? Is there objection? Agree in the Porter Committee which fair will pass the bill. Chairs none. Porter Committee is agreed to. Shall the main question be now put? Are there any objections? The chair is none, and the main question is ordered. Shall this bill now pass? The question is on the pass of the bill. All those in favor of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed, no. Secretary will unlock the machine.
On the passage of the bill, the ayes are 48, the noes are 5. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Secretary will read Senate Bill 176.
Senate Bill 176 by Senator James of the 35th and others, a bill to be entitled, an act to amend Part 15 of Article 6 of Chapter 2 of Title 20 of the Official Code of Georgia, annotated relating to miscellaneous provisions regarding elementary and secondary education so as to require that youth athletes participating in gridiron football shall be equipped and wear a helmet which has at least earned a 4-star rating at the Virginia Tech Helmet Rating Scale at the time of its use, to provide for an exception, to provide for a short title, to provide for related matters, to repeal conflicting law, and for other purposes. The Senate Committee on Education and Youth recommends this bill do pass by substitute. Mr. President, Senate Committee on Education and Youth offers the following substitute to Senate Bill 176, a bill to be entitled, an act to amend Part 15 of Article 6 of Chapter 2 of Title 20 of the Official Code of Georgia, annotated, relating to miscellaneous provisions regarding elementary and secondary education so as to strongly encourage that youth athletes participating in gridiron football to be equipped with and wear a helmet which has at least a 4-star rating on the Virginia Tech Helmet Rating Scale at the time of its use, to provide for an exception, to provide for a short title, to provide for related matters, to repeal conflicting laws, and for other purposes. Mr. President, this completes the order.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 35th District for the purpose of presenting the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. Last year, about this time, near the end of the session, about 20 of my constituents came to my office and provided me with letters and petitions. It was 5,000 signatures urging the state legislature to look at the Virginia Tech Helmet Rating Program and urging or requiring that all schools have those kind of helmets that were safe. And they did that as a result of a young man, DeAndre Gregory Thurman, who was 16 years old, and during that preseason scrimmage at Banneker High School in South Fulton, he broke his neck during a tackle, and he died. DeAndre was a junior at Creekside High School and had a scholarship to play football at the University of Kentucky. So we didn't have enough time to put a bill in or to address it at that time. But over the interim, we did put together Senate Bill 176, which encourages schools and recreation departments to provide a helmet that receives at least a 4-star rating from the Virginia Tech Helmet Program for the sport of contact football. Nearly 300,000 brain injuries occur each year in the United States to players from brain injuries that occur frequently in football. Sports are the second leading cause of traumatic brain injury in the United States. And according to a recent study published in the Journal of Neurology, helmets with lower than 4 rating can reduce, with higher than 4 rating can reduce the occurrence of concussions by 53.9%. So under this bill, 20 models would be eligible in use, and they are comparable in cost for all who are currently used in high schools or middle schools and colleges that are currently using helmets. The cost of the helmets range from $149 all the way up to $414, and the price of the purchase could be reduced through bulk ordering. So I encourage you to please pass Senate Bill 176 because it encourages an extra requirement for concussion prevention for players of gridiron football. And if there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer it, but if not, I'll yield the well. Oh, there's one other thing. This would not apply to participation in a non-contact version of gridiron football. So are there any questions? I'd be happy to answer them. If there are no questions, I yield the well and respectfully ask for you to do pass 176. Thank you.
There are questions, Senator. The senator from the 31st District is recognized for the purpose of asking a question.
Does the senator yield?
Yes, sir, I yield.
Have you heard any from your local high schools about their approval or disapproval of this bill?
Most of them do approve of this bill, especially Creekside and Banneker and most of the Fulton County school systems. In fact, many of them have on their own, since the unfortunate tragedy of the young man, have already started using a quality helmet that is at least 4 rating or higher.
Thank you, Senator.
You're very welcome, sir. Are there any other questions? If there are no other questions, I yield the will and ask for your favorable consideration. Thank you.
There are no further questions. Thank you, Senator. The senator from the 54th District is recognized for the purpose of speaking to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senators, I know the hour is late, and I will try to be brief. I rise to speak in support of Senate Bill 176. I appreciate the senator from the 35th's passion for children and for recreation and for athletics, and also her willingness to work with and through the committee process to make this essentially something that we are urging systems to consider. I think the senator from the 31st raises a good point about the cost that will be borne by purchasing this equipment. But I just want to remind the Senate of our story, of our state's story when it relates to this very issue. 1897, Von Gammon from Rome, Georgia, was a student at the University of Georgia and was playing football against the University of Virginia. On October 30th, 1897, he was injured by head trauma, and he passed away the next morning at Grady Hospital here in Atlanta. This legislature, with our compatriots across the hall, passed legislation outlawing football in the state of Georgia in all colleges. That was the University of Georgia, that was Mercer, that was Georgia Tech, and I'm not sure if anyone else was playing college football at that time. Von Gammon's mother wrote a letter to the governor of Georgia urging him to veto the legislation because, as saddened as she was at the loss of her son, she knew how much he and his friends loved the sport. So as somebody who also loves the sport, I want to thank the Senator for the 35th for advancing the discussion around safe play in football, and I think this is a good move. I really appreciate the folks at Virginia Tech and their work on this rating system. As somebody who's had experience with these helmets with youth football, I can tell you there is a substantive difference, and when young men are taught to play football properly with the proper equipment, it is a safe and really enjoyable sport. So I appreciate the Senator from the 35th, and I ask your favorable consideration of this bill. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the will.
Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the bill? Question is on the adoption of the committee substitute. Is there objection to the adoption of the committee substitute? Chair hears no objection. The committee substitute is adopted. Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the bill? Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears no objection, and the report of the committee is agreed to. Shall the main question now be put? Are there any objections? The chair hears no objections, and the main question is ordered. Shall this bill now pass by a substitute? The question is on the passage of the bill. All those in favor of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed, no. The secretary will unlock the machine. 5 seconds remaining to vote. On the passage of the bill, the ayes are 41, the noes are 1. The bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Secretary will read Senate Bill 141.
Senate Bill 141 by Senator Jones of the 10th and others, a bill to be entitled, an act to amend Code Section 15-11-2 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to definitions for juvenile proceedings under Juvenile Code so as to provide that minor violations of weapons in school safety zones are not considered Class B designated felonies, to restore certain provisions to their prior form due to the conflict between the enactment of the 2014 House Bill 60 and House Bill 826, to provide for an effective date and applicability, to provide for related matters, to repeal conflicting laws, and for other purposes. Mr. President, Senate Committee on Judiciary recommends this bill do pass by substitute. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on the Judiciary offers the following substitute to Senate Bill 141, bill to be entitled, an act to amend Code Section 15-11-2 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to definitions for juvenile proceedings under Juvenile Code, so as to provide that minor violations of weapons in school safety zones are not considered Class B designated felonies, to restore certain provisions to the prior form due to the conflict between the enactment of the 2014 House Bill 60 and House Bill 826, to amend Code Section 20-2-1184 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to reporting of student-committed prohibited acts, so as to limit the reporting of certain acts, to provide for related matters, to repeal conflicting law, and for other purposes. Mr. President, this completes the order.
The hour is late. If everyone will give their attention to the speaker in the well, the chair recognizes the senator from the 10th District for the purpose of presenting the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President, and members of this esteemed body. Senate Bill 141 is simply language that was unintentionally removed from the books with House Bill 60 and House Bill 826 from last year. This language was passed out of this body 6 years ago, signed into law by Governor Sonny Perdue. And let me just thank the senator from the 29th for his efforts and the Judiciary Committee in perfecting this legislation. Is simply give kids a second chance who inadvertently brought a weapon to classrooms so it would not be considered a designated felony. And if there's no question, Mr. President, I yield the well.
There are no questions.
Thank you, Mr. And I would encourage your favorable consideration of Senate Bill 141.
Question is on the adoption of the committee substitute. Is there objection to the adoption of the committee substitute? Hearing no objection, the committee substitute is adopted. Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the bill? Is there objection to agreeing to the report that is favorable to the passage of the bill? Chair hears no objection. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall the main question now be put? Are there any objections? The chair hears no objections, and the main question is ordered. Shall this bill now pass by substitute? The question is on the passage of the bill. All those in favor of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed, no. Secretary will unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the ayes are 42, the noes are 0. The bill having received the requisite constitutional majority is therefore passed. Secretary will read Senate Bill 109.
Senate Bill 109 by Senator Orrock of the 36th and others, a bill to be entitled, an act to amend Article 1 of Chapter 1 of Title 31 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to general provisions of relative to health so as to clarify the use of effectiveness of physician orders for life-sustaining treatment forms, to provide alternative terminology for do not resuscitate orders, to amend other code sections of the Official Code of Georgia annotated for purposes of conformity to provide for related matters, to repeal conflicting laws, and for other purposes. Senate Committee on Health and Human Services recommends this bill do pass by substitute. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Health and Human Services offers the following substitute to Senate Bill 109, a bill to be entitled An Act to Amend Article 1 of Chapter 1 of Title 31 of the Official Code of Georgia, annotated, relating to general provisions relative to health, so as to clarify the use of and effectiveness of physician orders of life-sustaining treatment forms, to provide alternative terminology for do not resuscitate orders, to amend other code sections of the Official Code of Georgia, annotated, for purposes of conformity, to provide for related matters, to repeal conflicting laws, and for other purposes. Mr. President, Senator Ligon of the 3rd and others offer the First Amendment to amend Senate Committee on Health and Human Services substitute to Senate Bill 109 by striking the quotation mark at the end of line 141 and inserting after line 141 the following: F. Nothing in this code section shall be construed to authorize any act prohibited by the code section 16-5-5, any health care provider, health care facility, or any other person who violates code section 16-5-5 shall not be entitled to any civil immunity pursuant to this code section. Mr. President, this completes the order.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 36th District for the purpose of presenting the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I bring to you Senate Bill 109, which is a bill to clarify language and address those end-of-life decisions that a physician, a hospital, the patient, and the family face. This bill clarifies that the physician's order for life-sustaining treatment will be a form that the Department of Public Health develops and maintains, and will be available to be implemented in the case of a patient entering what a doctor deems to be their last year of life. In other words, someone really with a terminal condition and facing an end-of-life decision. The Committee on Health and Human Services did extensive work on this bill. I wanted to appreciate the input from committee members. I believe we met 3 times. We also had about 10 or 12 groups who made input on this, including the hospitals and nursing homes, the palliative care and hospice organizations, the Medical Association of Georgia, Georgia Right to Life, the Baptist Convention, the Catholic Diocese, and an array of organizations and individuals. And we believe that working with ethicists from Emory University, that we got a good approach that's going to ensure that people have their end-of-life wishes honored, even if they are unconscious and unable to speak for themselves. I'm happy to answer any questions. There will be one amendment that's before you, and the author of that will explain that. That essentially just ensures that this language does not in any way override or interfere with the assisted suicide language in the statutes. I would ask for your favorable consideration of this bill, and if there are no questions, I'll yield well.
There is a question, Senator.
Thank you.
The senator from the 40th District is recognized.
Does Senator yield?
I yield.
Isn't it you worked with numerous parties on this for a long time in order to get this medical order, so people's wishes via their advance directive can happen, and that it's very much appreciated by some of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, that's true. There's been a lot of input, and I appreciate it. We've got a better bill as a result. Ask for your favorable support, and I'll yield the well if there are no questions.
There is an additional question. Do you wish to yield?
I yield. Thank you.
Will the senator yield?
I yield to the chair lady.
Senator, is it not true that we spent 3 hours working on this bill just in committee, and that you spent many, many hours, and not only that you spent weeks working on this bill, and that you've done a great job bringing all this collaborative group together, which is absolutely, it's a very diverse group, but you brought them all together, and you're to be congratulated. Is that not true?
Thank you to the chair lady, and thank you for your leadership on this. We did spend a great deal of time, and there's a statewide coalition that works to perfect this physician's order that made great input as well. But the committee as a whole made tremendous input as we went through the process. If there are no further questions, I'll yield the well and ask for your favorable support.
No further questions, Senator. The senator from the 3rd District is recognized for the purpose of presenting the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President.
assisting someone to commit suicide in the state of Georgia is illegal. In fact, it's a felony which is punishable by 1 to 10 years in prison. And the amendment makes it clear that nothing within this bill will permit someone to assist another person to commit suicide. And the reference to OCGA 16-5-5 is in fact the code section which makes it a felony to assist anyone with committing suicide in this state. And just for the sake of clarity, because of certain language within the bill, we felt that it was necessary to include this. This amendment is supported by Georgia Right to Life, the Georgia Baptist Convention, the Georgia Life Alliance, and the Archdiocese of Atlanta. So, Mr. President, unless there are any questions, I will yield the will.
There are no questions. Senator? Question now is on the adoption of the floor amendment by the senator from the 3rd District to the committee substitute. Is there objection to the adoption of the floor amendment to the committee substitute? Hearing no objection, the floor amendment to the committee substitute is adopted. I'm sorry. Hearing no objection, the floor amendment to the committee substitute is adopted. The question is on the adoption of the committee substitute as amended. Is there objection to the adoption of the committee substitute as amended? Hearing no objection, the committee substitute as amended is adopted. Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the bill? Is there objection to agreeing to the favorable report of the bill, to the report which is favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears no objection. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall the main question now be put? Are there any objections? The chair hears no objections, and the main question is ordered. Shall the bill now pass by substitute? The question is on the passage of the bill. All those in favor of the bill will vote yes, aye. Those opposed, no. The secretary will unlock the machine. Okay. On the passage of the bill, the ayes are 44, the noes are 0. The bill having received the requisite constitutional majority is therefore passed. The distinguished majority leader is recognized for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the Senate stand in recess until midnight, then adjourn pursuant to Senate Resolution 167 until 10 a.m. on Wednesday, March the 18th.
The secretary will read the announcements. Are there any announcements? There are no announcements. The senator from the 4th District is recognized for the purpose of making an announcement.
Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, members of the Appropriations Committee, if you'll give me your attention just a second. Wednesday morning, which is the first day we'll be back, we're meeting at 8 o'clock to pass out the 2016 budget in room 341. That's 8 o'clock on the first day back, and so please try to be there. And we only have an hour because the rules will be meeting at 9, I guess. So please be there and help us get a quorum, and we'll have the budget ready for you to consider, hopefully vote it out, and get it out of committee on Wednesday and then on the floor on Friday is the plan right now. So please try to get back in time to be at our meeting, appropriations meeting at 8 o'clock Wednesday morning. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator. For what purpose does the senator from the 41st District rise?
Announcements. I have an announcement
that the senator is recognized for the purpose of making an announcement.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to remind members of the Senate Democratic Caucus that we'll have a meeting as soon as they can get down after adjournment in 121.
The senator from the 46th district has moved that the Senate stand adjourned. To clarify, the senator from the 46th district has moved that the Senate stand in recess until midnight this evening, upon which the Senate will adjourn. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The motion carries, and the Senate will stand in recess until midnight tonight, whereupon will be adjourned.